Do you want to bring balance to all the wireless radiation fields in your life, including 5G? The Omnia Radiation Balancer is a small sticker you can stick on any device. It changes the state of the field and creates a new resonance between the wireless radiation and your energy field. On the link below, you'll see all our testing results that show how the body responds excellently once you've made this change in your life. And here's a special offer for the Journey to Truth crowd. Just enter the word truth in caps at the checkout for your 10% discount. It's easy to bring balance back to your body with the Omnia Radiation Balancer.
This is totally unreal that this happened like in 1942 on this planet.
Hey guys, you're listening to Journey to Truth podcast. Welcome back. We just wrapped up episode 100 with Allison Coe, and it was amazing. It was one of our favorites. She is just one of the best to have on. And thank you all who supported us, all the new subscribers, new listeners. It's really exciting time for us. It's an exciting time for everybody. This Secret Space Program month that we're getting into now is something that, honestly, when we started this podcast, that was one of the big things I wanted to cover, and we haven't covered it quite enough, I don't think. So I'm really excited to get some of these whistleblowers coming forward, telling their stories, and just diving deep and breaking this down and seeing what's really going on below our feet and above our heads. And what better way to start off with Tony Rodrigues? I don't know if many of you guys know who he is or not, but he's been putting out a lot of great content. He's been doing interviews with Jermaine and Scott, 1 Foot in 5D. If you haven't heard him before, I recommend checking out some other interviews. Every time you listen to one of them, you find something new. Something new comes out of you, Tony. It's really interesting. You can't just hear one interview to get the whole story, right?
So many details too. It's impressive.
Thank you. It's hard to say, you're talking about 20 years, you're talking about 20, 30 years of life events that kind of add up, that went through it when the experience itself was 20 years long, and there's just no way to cover it in a couple hours.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and that's
sure.
Kind of the whole point of this. And I'm sure you're familiar with William Tompkins, and he passed away disclosing this information, and who knows if there was any controversy around that death or not, but this whole month is kind of in dedication to him also, because he was I don't know, he was one of the leading figures in the disclosure of the SSP and what happened during World War II. So it was really cool.
William Tompkins had some of the most irrefutable evidence behind his case. So he had documents, and he just had a lot of solid info that was hard for anybody. There are people that their version of skepticism is actually avid, debunking. Yeah. And William Tompkins was kind of bulletproof in that regard. It's funny, there was a third party that was going to introduce, I was going to get a talk with William Tompkins, like a phone call, and we were just working out the details of it about 30 days before he passed away. And I was very heartbroken because I had heard that he wanted to speak to me, and I definitely wanted to speak to him. He had a lot of things. Whenever you've been through, like I have a lot of memories back of my account of being taken on a 20-year tour. Some people call it a 20 and back. I was abducted and did a 20-year tour. I have a lot of that. I have maybe 70-80% recall, but there's a lot I don't recall. And it's just like, I explain it all the time. Like, what was your 7th birthday like? And you go, well, I don't know. And then, but if you met somebody else that was at your 7th birthday party and they go, hey, remember that table we broke? and you go, oh yeah, now I remember. And you would access even more memories that you couldn't even access when I just asked you about your birthday. I'm being totally hypothetical, but what I'm saying is when somebody else opens a keystone memory, then it accesses more memories.
Oh yeah.
And so people that have gone through a tour, like it's natural for us to seek out each other, to try to, you know what I mean? To try to jog each other's memory. So everybody that I've talked to some of the other guys that have come forward. A lot of them have come forward and been harassed in their personal life and went back into, you know what I mean, back into secrecy about it. But people that I talk to, everybody wants to talk to more people. And it's really enjoyable to speak to somebody that has inside knowledge.
Yeah.
And William Tompkins was like, the granddaddy of that. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. He was one of the big, he was crucial to my awakening. So it's fitting. You know what? And right now, it seems like all of these whistleblowers, it's just they're entering the collective consciousness. I'm seeing them pop up everywhere. They interview more and more people are coming forward. More interviews are there. Our friends are interviewing you guys on their channels, but everybody's being guided to for some reason. Why? Because I think disclosure is on the horizon, and this information needs to get into the collective, and that's why we're doing this. Yeah,
it is. I feel we're very close to. And you got to face it, like the bar is set low for disclosure. Most people are going to be shocked when they go, hey, there's bacteria.
Yeah.
Like the bar set very, very low because they've done such a good job all along of hiding it. So we're going to get a disclosure. We're going to get a big one, I think, in the next, some people say this year, maybe the year, next 4 or 5 years. I think within 4 or 5 years, we're going to get a big, an event. But, and then, everything in the history of mankind has taught me one thing, like when you can kind of follow a bar graph and kind of tell where it's headed, that we're going to get a pack of lies surrounded by disclosure. We're going to get a watery veiled, you know what I mean? We're going to see disclosure through sunglasses, and we're not going to see the full light of disclosure.
No question about it. So let's just jump in then and explain to people. I mean, some people might be listening to this new to this information. We don't know. So explain to people what is going on. There is a secret space program taking place, and they're taking people as children, and unbeknownst to their parents. It's a very complicated procedure. Not procedure, but you know what I mean. It's a very complicated technology. Yeah, technology.
Okay, so I'm not a very super proficient on all of the history of how it came about. But basically, I mean, to somebody that's never heard this before, it's going to be very hard to swallow. This is a hard ledge to leap off of, to believe. But mankind has been, our recent history of mankind has been in space for about 100 years, perhaps a little bit longer. The Nazis, Germany discovered spaceflight. World War I was about money and power, and World War II was about interstellar flight. And the Germans had discovered it through means of channeling with ET, telepathic communication over great distances with ETs that gave them, schematics to build an interstellar craft. And once that happened, everybody wanted it. War broke out. The Germans lost the territory, but retreated to Antarctica, where they had created a base that had access to ruins and ancient technology from extraterrestrials that had left it there. They've also went out into the solar system and colonized asteroids and planets, Mars, for instance, and colonies were set up. Colony corporations have been set up throughout the solar system. And since then, the United States and most other countries have covertly joined into that. And there are something like 5 space fleets that originated from Earth in our solar system that are manned by humans and certain extraterrestrials. We've traded technology with extraterrestrials, and one of them is a life extension technology, which is, from what I remember, is very common through the cosmos, and one of the very first technologies that gets traded with a species that achieves interstellar flight. So in other words, when you make a spaceship and you go out and make contact with extraterrestrials and find out that they're radically advanced and you want to trade something for them, some goods or whatever it is, one of the first things they'll give you is the 20 and back, or the 20-year tour technology. So it's a life extension technology. It's very widespread. And what becomes of that is abuse. And in my personal experience, I was greatly abused from it. I was taken and basically used as a slave. I was enslaved, and it was free labor for them for these programs. And I wasn't put through the front door of one of these programs. I was ushered in the back door, the side door of one of these programs personally, just people that had access that wanted to run through some kids for themselves. And that seems to be what's happened. And I've found a great deal of evidence to support the things that I remember after I remember them. And I had basically a 20-year tour is you're taken, they abduct you. And this is a standard abduction story is that, we saw the lights blinked and then we saw a UFO and then I lost some time and I woke up a little bit later and I don't know what happened. I was different. I don't know why or how. Yeah. I mean, how many times that fits the bill for, a large amount of abduction cases.
Oh, yeah.
Well, in my case, well, go ahead.
I was just going to say, for one, I didn't know it was possible to sum it up like you just did. And the whole thing from
it's impressive.
Yeah. And that was you guys whoever's listening to this, that's not even the tip of the iceberg. What actually took place during that time period is mind blowing, is actually mind blowing. And what he's getting ready to get into is even more mind blowing. And it takes a lot to wrap your head. It takes a lot to wrap your head around it. We're not. And that's because we've been suppressed. We're not supposed to remember this stuff. We've been programmed away from it. So if you can be open-minded enough to at least hear him out, and at least consider the possibility, that's the best you can do for yourself.
Yeah, we said off air a few minutes ago before we started recording this is that if you've never heard any of this before and you heard my testimony and you weren't skeptical, it would be weird. It would be weird if you weren't skeptical. Mm-hmm. People that follow this should be skeptical of me. My I didn't want to take it to the grave with me. I didn't want to be dying and think, man, I should have told somebody, because I do remember a lot of things. It's not just a few memories. There's a lot of other people like me that have come forward that should be researched, and you can research a lot of things moving forward if this is new information. But typically you lose people. You get the 1,000-yard stare when you say that there was a time travel. When you get into the age regression and then the time travel backwards, people go, what? No. Everybody's willing to believe in ETs. Everybody believes that there's life out there. It's because it's so common. It's like a common sense issue.
Yes.
Like, you know what I mean? Billions and trillions of stars, and the only one we're close to has us on it. So that we're batting 100. There's got to be life out there. So everybody believes that it's easy. But when you talk about time travel, that when you travel great distances of space, you can also travel time as well. Mm-hmm. You really lose people because we're just not wired to think about time travel. We're really,
sorry to interject again, but if you listen to William Tompkins' testimony, he talks about a pill that was available that pharmaceutical companies were developing back when he was alive, that you take. It's like an age regression pill. And he talked about this and the companies involved, and he said they're using it. It's just not publicly available. And that's a pill. That's just a pill. This isn't the type of technology, but if they can do it via pill, then obviously they got that from somewhere.
Well, and what I believe, again, if you get a surgery performed on you, let's say you get your kidneys worked on, you go in and get surgery, and then you go through it. When you get done with it, you don't know how to perform kidney surgery. So I experienced it, but I don't know really what the heck happened to me. I don't know how they did it, but I experienced it. And so what a 20-year tour is they can take somebody and do, and I think there's more than one version of it. I think that there's more than one way. Like some people go and because they have a different purpose or a different outcome that they want. Some people go, We've had people talking about going for 60 years. We have people talking about doing 220s and 40 years. William Tompkins talked about that. Mm-hmm. So I believe there are different methods to it. I think there's a version that I went through that was involved cloning, human cloning, and a form of consciousness transferal. And a lot of their technology, a lot of the really radical medical technology involves cloning body parts or cloning an entirely new body and then using some technology that can transfer consciousness into that new body. And then you wake up with all your memories and everything and you're perfectly well. But again, I experienced it, but I don't know how it works kind of thing. So but they take somebody and they can work them for 20 years. I was told that the process that I went through was in 20-year increments for every species, not just humans, but any other species, because after that, they ran the risk of having some sort of mental handicap. In other words, of going insanity. The probability of going more than 20 years at a time was probable of causing a mental problem. I've also talked to other insiders that said there are natural reasons for the time travel to go in 20-year increments. So there are more than one factor, but basically they can work you for 20 years. Like you said, that age regression pill put you back in your body that you saw, it put you back in your original body that's 20 years younger, put you back in time and return you to the spot of the abduction 15 to 30 minutes later. So people get some sort of contact, they see an ET or a craft, they lose consciousness, they wake up 30 minutes later, they're slightly different, they have no memory of what happened, and they could have worked for 20 years and gone to other star systems and done many other things and been reprogrammed with mind control. There are radical technologies and done many other things, and then put back in their organic life. And then the timeline of Earth isn't affected at all. They're just put back and then let go. Right? You know what I mean? Like tagging a fish and putting it back in the water, basically. And they had a fish for 20 years to do whatever they want. I mean, I'm using metaphor, but that is also a very hard pill to swallow, but that's exactly how I experienced it. I was taken at 10 years old. I was taken and I was worked through several black programs. I was privately owned in the beginning. I did six or 7 years on Earth, and I went from black program to black program, privately owned, not particularly by the government, but I was owned by individuals as a slave. And I had different purposes. And whenever I lost the ability to be effective at what I was doing, they would retrain me or test me and put me into something else. And then after that, I was sold off to the military, the secret military, space program military, into the solar system corporations, colony corporations. And I went to Mars Colony Corp and was a support soldier for a short time, and that program was canceled. And I was sold off to the Ceres Colony Corporation, which is the small planetoid Ceres that's in between Mars and the asteroid belt. And I lived there for about a decade, and I worked on interstellar crafts. The first one, I was a ship maintenance on an interstellar craft, and then that ship was decommissioned, and I was promoted to cargo engineer on an interstellar trade ship. And we went all over the galaxy and to other galaxies, trading with extraterrestrials, other races for goods for technology was our prime mission. That's what I did. At the end, I was put back. I was taken back to the moon, went through a long procedure and put back, and I woke up the next morning back in 1982, feeling like I had been gone for 20 years, and I didn't know my way. I barely could recognize my room. I didn't know the toys that I had anymore. I went to school. I forgot where the bathroom was that day, and I was a changed person ever after. And I had no memory. Those memories were deleted. And there are other reasons. I guess I need to make a schematic on why I think it was cloning involved. But basically, I was taken, and I woke up, and I had no memory of mom and dad and my family. No, those memories are gone.
Really?
Lived the 20 years, got put back, had all those memories of 20 years of things. I had relationships, friends, I had a career. Put back, and then all of a sudden I had all those memories back of mom and dad and my life, and I had no memories of the 20 years.
Wow.
Well,
that's, yeah.
So that was a lot. Because there's so much that happened in between then. Going back, let's get into some details here. Going back to when you were a child, you said you started off your first so many years were served here on Earth. Now, was that your time in Peru and Seattle, or was that before you were 10, or that happened after you were?
No, that was then. So that exactly. Okay. So when I was taken, if you want to go into chronology of the 20 years that I was taken, in the beginning, they got permission. I was taken. I was in a laboratory with extraterrestrials, taken out of my bed. I grew up in southern Michigan, and woke up in a laboratory, sitting on a table, just like so many other abduction experiences. It was pretty run of the mill. They did a procedure on me, and I lost consciousness. And when I woke up, I was in Inyo Kern Air Base in Southern California. There was a human doctor, and it was old 50s style furniture that they had set up and turned like a portable, those portable buildings that the schools have, one of those into, there's a bunch of cots, and there was a dozen kids like me and I got a medical procedure, and I had complete amnesia. He asked me, "Do you remember your mom or dad? Do you know how you got here?" And I had no memory of any of that. I woke up with amnesia, and then I went through a trauma-based mind control program, which they had programmed. They tested me, and we were trained into like remote viewing. It was psychic training, and it was a trauma-based mind control program, so that they could shock us, and we would just become catatonic and await commands. We were trained. It was a trauma-based mind control, and all of that stuff that they there's a lot of information about it on the internet about that, the MK Ultra stuff, and it was exactly like that. And this was something, frankly, that I remembered it before I discovered that it existed. You know what I mean? Like, I got my memories back, and I went and got a MRI in the late April of 2015, and 2 weeks later, in early May of 2015, all the memories came. Well, the memories began to come back in huge chunks, years of memories at a time.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, a lot of people don't understand, that comes up, if I don't explain that, like, how did I get my memories back? I think it was the MRI. It might've been a coincidence. I don't know, but it was right in that time frame. But Inyo Current Air Base, and then I was taken to Seattle to a private home there. He was a billionaire, which I don't publicly say his name because his family, and it's not fair to kind of unleash something on that. And I kind of fear for my family. It's at the same time, he was a bad person, but he was a practicing Satanist. And also, that unfortunately is one of the more sound versions of my testimony that I came out in 2015 and went on the record about it. And this was long before the Hillary emails or the Pizzagate or any of Satanism was even talked about yet. I was the first one, and then I connected it to the space program. I was a year early before all of the, the pedogate stuff happened.
Well, that part of your testimony is moving. You go into it in depth on your interview with Jermaine and Scott. For anybody who doesn't know who they are, they have a channel on YouTube also. We'll link that interview. But when you go into those details, I think it's just as important as the space program information, because people need to understand what's taking place, what's actually happening. This Pizzagate stuff and the pedogate, or whatever you want to call it, is real, and the satanic rituals.
Well, it's I don't mean to interrupt you back, but
go ahead.
Note the time. Where are we at here? It's January 5th, 2021. So a lot of the the movement that support the president, the outgoing president, or whatever's going to happen in the next few weeks, that's one of the biggest things that the last administration hung their hat on was pedophilia, and finding that and now just recently in Twitter, we had Lynn Wood say last week that the Supreme Court justices were blackmailed with pedophilia, and that's why they threw out the voter fraud case.
He even gave details of how the blackmail procedure worked. Yeah, I mean,
right. So these are things that I was remembered, and believe me, when in the beginning I was looking for something to disprove everything that I remembered, because this is what I remembered, because I remembered being abused. There was a time, so I went to Seattle, and then I went to Peru and was in psychic service, and I worked in Puerto Tawantinsuyo, Peru, and I was at a young age. I was like 11 until 13 or so, and they were drugging us. And what it was we were kids, and they would give us some drug and put us near to death, and we were able to channel others, just the same way that the Germans channeled and got the plans for the interstellar craft, the same exact thing, the Maria Orsic story. But they were doing this on command with us kids that went through this program. And I was being used to channel, and they were doing drug shipments from Puerto Tawantinsuyo, Peru, I always say it wrong, to Santa Marta, Colombia. And it was plane, and they had lost a plane in bad weather. So they sent me down there, and I was a form of navigation, or like a safety. And they would drug me halfway through the flight and ask me questions. And the man that was my handler said that I said all kinds that there were times I spoke in fluent Spanish. I still don't know Spanish to this day, but he said he talked to his grandmother, he talked to people that were dead, and I was channeling for them. And for the first 2 years down there, they did it. It was like monthly, and they had doses of whatever drug they were giving me. And it was once a month that they would take me. And eventually he had a long notebook of questions from everybody in the town. But I lost that ability right around 13, and I was taken back to Seattle. And that's where I witnessed a lot of the pedogate things. And I was actually participating. I was used as a sex slave, and they were parties that all over the West Coast, we would do the lineup. There was myself and other foster boys that lived in the home, and we were used for that. And that, it wasn't every day. It wasn't a fun, what I mean? We're talking like 6 parties a year during the summer that we were used for. The rest of the time, it was like being a foster kid there. So it wasn't, like a thing, but something very odd, but it did happen. And we were groomed for that, to be sexually abused. And we were also told to look in a certain direction while it was happening, because somebody far away, 100 feet away, was in the bushes filming it. And these are things that I also remembered, and I went on record in 2015 about. I also went on record in 2015 and described, sadly, accurately, some of the rituals that they did, and other people that were ex-Satanists, researchers that had experience with Satanism, realized that I described rituals pretty much accurately. And I have, in my life, I have no experience with Satanism. I grew up in Episcopal. My mom is a very religious woman. One
of the most interesting parts of that story is when you recalled seeing that entity during the one ritual. I think that's actually powerful, because a lot of the veil is thinning now, and people are seeing a lot of different things. And that story is very interesting to me on what was taking place there. Would you mind going into that?
There's a lot of details about it. I mean, I'll try to do it without talking the whole hour away. But what I've found, so when I got my memories back in 2015, I was left in the wake of this, and really with no one to talk to. And when I accepted it that it was real, so back in 2015, I got on Google Earth and I found the house.
Really?
I found the town in Peru. I found exactly had the layout. I found ponds near the town that I remember going fishing at. He took me fishing. I lived there. I found where I used to walk. The streets were exactly the same. I used to go one street over and then up and then count 3 streets over, and I'd end up at the plaza where I was met to go to the airport and go on the flights. And it was exactly how I remembered it. And the house in Seattle was exactly how. And I so much so that I went there. I flew there in 2016. I went to Seattle, and I knew not only the house but my way around. I knew the inside of the nearby store that has candy on sale for cheap. I knew the beach. And before I got to the end of the beach, I knew the rocks were bigger down at the end of the beach. And I was constantly on the phone with researchers while I was there, because I wish somebody could have went and filmed it, but I didn't expect my memories to be that accurate. But that particular instance that you're talking about, I was left wondering why do people do that? Why is Satanism prevalent in the elite, with the elite? And the thing that I've concluded is that it's not really a religion at all, that really it was a technology, like an ancient technology and ritual technology that they're doing. They were channeling. They gave us a crushed up flower, like a hallucinogenic flower, and it only lasted for a few minutes, the effect of it. It was a hallucinogen, but they were trying to channel an entity from who knows where, just to get information, to access information. And you got to think, if you can do this, if you can access accurately information from the past or the future, so an entity that lives outside of time space. I've also found a lot of documents that the CIA, through Project Grill Flame, Project Center Lane, and eventually Project Stargate, documents that support all of this, the things that I experienced, and especially that they can channel entities from outside of time space that can have accurate information of the past or the future. So that basically it's a technology. It's not like they're worshiping this thing. They were calling it forward to get ahead, like it's a tech. And that's what they were doing. It was a ritual thing. It was during a certain alignment, like there was a certain time frame that it would work. And they had us kids, and there was a ritual there that they were doing to access.
What did they have you kids doing actually? And how did you see that entity come through?
So they had a mortar and pestle thing, like that you crush, and they had a flower. It was a flower that they crushed up, They had us kids in the center. We were dressed in they were all dressed in white robes, which is not a typical Satanic ritual attire.
Black robes normally, right?
They were white robes, and they were half of the people there. It was their first time, so there were 8 or 9 people there, if I remember right. They gave us this. They put a little bit of I think it was wine that they mixed it with, or some kind of alcohol. They made us drink it, and we only had a few minutes. And they had, the same way that the old Catholic Church, if you look at like the Vatican, they have those big incense burning things that hang on a rope, and they can swing them, and it causes a cloud. They all stood around us in a circle, and 2 or 3 of them had these things, and they made a big cloud of incense above us. And when we looked up into the cloud while we were on this drug, I could see an entity there looking back down at us.
Wow.
And they expected it to go into one of us and start talking, and it didn't. So it was a fail. But at the same time, all 3, there was myself, a young girl, and another boy, and all 3 of us saw the same thing. So we weren't having individual hallucinations. We were all seeing the same exact thing at the same time. And it was a cloud above us, and it looked down on us, and it got scared, or it got upset at one of us and left.
Didn't you say that it said something to one of your friends or one of the other kids there? The
boy there he said that was the whole reason he was there. And I looked over him, and he turned, and again, I'm hallucinating. He turned, there was a beam, he lit up at it, and he was there like he had a past with it. He said, "This is the reason I'm here." And he challenged it, like, come on,
Yeah.
And he saw it, and it was insulted. It was like, what is this? Like it was invited there with the red carpet. It thought it was going to get the red carpet treatment. And here is this kid that was basically aggro with it, aggroed on him. And that's kind of what I saw. But it was a hallucination. It's hard to just, I don't want to lose people when I describe it. You get what I mean? But basically that's what I saw. And the kid had a beam of light come out of him towards it.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
that
when anybody does spiritual practices, we're told to imagine that type of stuff. Imagine yourself surrounded by light. Imagine all this stuff, because it is real. And I think that some of these drugs actually allow you to tap into that and see some of this stuff. I don't think people will think it's that crazy, honestly.
It feels crazy to remember it. These are when I remembered it. And then even afterwards, I remember being basically flabbergasted the next day, going, what is going on? What am I going through here? The entire time. And I was badly damaged after the mind control, the trauma-based mind control programming. I was badly damaged, and for years after that, for the whole time, but for years after that, before I healed, where I could even have some sort of, what I mean? I was kind of like a broken kid, where I would, cry a lot, and just kind of like in a very bit, like a mentally broken kid, because I had been through that program. And later on, when I got into my 20s, it started to kind of heal to where I could, I guess, think normally. I began to think more normally. And when I remember stuff like that, a lot of things I get headaches, and I don't want to say I get upset, but I get perturbed.
Yeah, I
understand. It's a painful state of mind to remember. To be able to go back and remember those times, it's also, I remember experiencing that state of mind, and it's painful. It's not comfortable at all.
Well, let's let's leave some of those details for the other interview where people can go check you out, because you do go deep into that story there, and on Jermaine's interview, and Jermaine and Scott. But let's go from there. So how did you go from that house and into the secret space program? From what I understand, you were drugged every day. They changed the drugs, and your body had a negative reaction, and they
were giving us pills. I think that they were trying. So again, we were in sex slave service. So they starved us. They kept us skinny. They kept us with a low body fat content. We had a very, just barely enough food to get by. I just remember always being hungry. We did calisthenics, and in the morning we took a cup of pills that were probably diet control vitamins and who knows something else. But in my life, I'm very allergic to codeine and that whole family of drugs. And it felt like the same kind of allergy. So they changed the formula of pills that they were giving us those mornings. And I got immediately sick. And after 3 days, I was throwing them back up. And I had asked her, my owner's wife, I said, can't you just tell them to ask them if I can go back on the old stuff? And she said, she called, and it was like, they had a supply of drugs that they were giving us, for whatever reason. And she said, nope, you're going to be sold off to the military. And right then and there, it was like I was a dead man walking. Nobody talked to me. It was a couple weeks after that before I was shipped off. And for that time, it was kind of like I was just dead to them all. But I didn't miss leaving. I was very happy to get out of there.
Sure.
It was an emotional black hole living in that house and under that circumstance. And my heart goes out to kids that live in a foster, institution like that, because while they are taken care of, we were taken care of, in a manner of speaking. I was in a mansion, basically. It was totally devoid of any kind of emotional support or any kind of like feeling of love or any kind of positive emotional support. That was totally devoid. And I feel for kids that are in a similar situation, if it's not that extreme where they're being abused like that. But just in that situation, I really feel for kids, because at that age and what I experienced, that was very damaging. And I think I still have some like I still seek out to this day to compensate for that time. For those few years that I was there, it was so loveless that that's like something that's very valuable to me now, is friendships and trying to get approval. You know what I mean? Like trying to not only to get it, but to show people that really don't even could care less that they're loved. You know what I mean? That they're loved, or to appreciative of them, because I experienced that. And my heart goes out to any kids that do. I was sold off to the military. She packed me up. It was very unceremonious. And we had to take a ferry. We were on one of the islands in Seattle. We took a ferry, and she drove me to basically behind like a big box store, back behind it where the dumpsters are. And we met some guys in a van, and they gave me an injection, and I lost consciousness. And I woke up on a flight to the moon, on a military flight, which could be easily described as what everybody says is a TR-3B, like 20, 30 seats wide in the rows on the inside. I was sitting next to a military. I think he looked like an Air Force guy, but I didn't know at the time what the uniforms were. He was in a fancy military uniform, formal. He was in formals. And he said, "You're with me, and you're not going to give me any trouble, are you, buddy?" And I woke up, and he said, "There's a bag. If you're going to get sick, you're going to be trained. Just stick with me. I'm going to take you to your assignment." And we flew to a base on the backside of the moon, where he handed me off. There were ETs there. There were lots of military personnel. I remember seeing outside the ship there, there's like a walk-in. I could see that there was a hangar with other ships in it. And I went in and got more of the mind control programming, this time with ETs, with the term tall whites isn't entirely fair. It's kind of like tall, bluish, milky grays.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like the color matters to researchers, but basically there's a species of humanoid that's very smart and more indigenous to space or low gravity than planets. And they were very smart things. They were in charge of the learning up there and a lot of the management, I guess. But
they could appear as a human if they wanted, though, right?
Well, I didn't witness any of that. I've heard stories of it. I didn't witness any of that. Years later, I did witness a few beings that had a form of invisibility. That it gave off a smoke. When you got close to it, you could see a gas that you could see right through it. Kind of like it was invisible. So if you were in a distance, it was completely invisible. When you got close, the invisibility effect was actually some kind of gas that was coming out of a suit, like a suit with a lot of holes with the gas coming out, and the gas made it invisible. And so, but I didn't see any kind of like shape shifting.
Sure. Let me note really quick. I just think it's very curious. And of course, this is what it is. But you said in Seattle, this took place on an island. Mm-hmm. Of course, it was an island.
Yeah, well, I mean, we were told that like you're not going to go anywhere and it's freezing water. Yeah. There were boys that tried to escape, and they got caught. And it was really cold, but there was freezing water, and you weren't going anywhere, and we knew it. You know, we were fenced in, and that's kind of, these people know what they're doing. And the other thing is, before we move on into the space stuff, but the society behind the what I experienced in Seattle, not just them, but it was a society, it was a culture, had everything worked out. They weren't new at it. They weren't new to this. They weren't figuring out what they were doing. The blackmailing and the Satanism and the sex stuff and all of that stuff was old to them. They had been practicing this for a very long time. It was a very developed culture. They had their own set of holidays. They had their own terms, words that they talked to. It was a very well-developed culture. And that's kind of what we're seeing now, being in our government. You know what I mean? You're kind of seeing them step to the front, and it's kind of scary what's going on, because it's terrifying to see it all come true, to see it unfold.
Well, that's why your testimony is so important, actually, and all the SSP whistleblowers, because this is taking everything and tying it together. It helps people connect the dots and understand why one thing is just as important as the other, and how it's all intertwined. And you know, people hear about UFOs and aliens, and then they don't understand, like, okay, big deal, they exist. Well, space programs, big deal, doesn't affect me. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. And you need to stop and listen to this stuff and understand how it's affecting your life and what's actually going on out there, and to your friends and family that you don't even understand.
I think that we've been greatly fooled. So I think the average person, even the most open-minded people that say, you know, I believe in all that. So yes, there's a conspiracy, even though we're still in thinking that we have some kind of random organic development. And by that, I mean, you know, like people say, well, there's no way they could know what the internet was going to do when they invented it. They knew exactly what it was going to do. They knew exactly what's going to happen with all the technologies that they introduced, because there are other planets in the exact same situation that they, you know what I mean? And some other planet has another slave set of people like us that they're running from behind the scenes with the exact same structure. And they let them have the internet 200 years ago, and they know exactly what's going to happen. When cars were invented, when the light bulb was invented, as technologies are given to us, this has already happened before on 1,000 other worlds, and they directed it, and they know exactly what kind of result they're going to get. So where we're at in our development is not a organic thing. It's being very controlled.
That's why some of these people say that the planets they visited resemble Earth, all the way down to fire trucks. And I mean, everything is the same. It's the same. Drugs and alcohol on other planets. I mean, gambling. This isn't just here.
Bootlegging. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
We did. For the most part, we were not concerned with a lot of lesser developed planets, because our mandate was to trade for technology. So we were seeking out more advanced societies and trying to get technology from them. But we did trade with others that were less advanced, and we did visit some places that were like us back in the 50s, or more like back in the 80s.
So
parallel development.
So let's go back to the moon. You were on the moon, and you were going through your training. I understand you were put into some type of combat training.
It wasn't what you would think it was, but you know, like I was never given a gun and taught how to load it and reload it and do all those. I was not told strategy or anything. It was 100% fight or flight response. They plugged me into a machine that showed me videos over and over again, and what it did was it taught me to not run from certain death, but to run towards it. And basically being trained to be like a suicide bomb, not a suicide bomber, but a suicide troop.
Sure.
And we were going to be a support soldier for real soldiers that were taught to strategy, you know. And so it basically consisted of getting eye drops and some drugs in the morning and watching videos over and over for months, you know, weeks. So I lost track of time. I didn't really, and it worked. And they tested us against a large insectoid, a large insect. They put us in an arena and tested us. And one of us went and blew himself up with it. And they were happy. Everybody cheered. They were thrilled about the project. It was a new thing. This would have been around 86, 87.
Okay.
87, mid 87 was, on the moon is when that would have happened. But then I was shipped off to Mars, where there was a very larger craft. It wasn't full of people. There was a lot of empty seats on it, and it flew to Mars in a short time. And when we got there, we had to wait in orbit for a couple hours, for a matter of hours, because the airspace there was not secure.
What's your speculation on the propulsion system that these craft use? Is it a portal you're just hopping through like the cosmic?
I believe it jumped. Yeah, I believe that it jumped there. And
but even still, it's still anti-gravitic type of technology.
Yes. So the ships later, I didn't know until later on when I was working on, as I started to get some rank, I was able to talk to people. The first ship I was on, I worked with two other guys that knew just as little as me, and nobody ever spoke to us. We were an automated system. We never left really where we were down below. It was basically a refitted submarine that was turned into a spaceship.
Sure.
And we did maintenance down below. We had a computer that told us what step-by-step instructions on what to do to maintain and to fix anything that broke. And that was my existence for seriously 8 years. That's all I did. It was soul crushing. It was mind numbing, But later on after that, when I got promoted, I got onto a ship where I actually had more water cooler kind of conversations with people that were, officers and things, and access to a much more high tech craft. And so it had several forms of propulsion, and one of them was an A to B, like a anti-grav propulsion, and then it jumped. And all the ships, so everybody coveted the battleships because they had a greater power output. And what they said was that in order for the ship to jump directly somewhere else far away, it took a while to power up and happen. So it couldn't jump and then turn around and jump somewhere else quickly. It had to wait,
it's
20 minutes.
What is it? Prepare for the jump to light speed. They have to power.
Yeah. They had to sit there for a while. Yeah. Right. It had to sit there. Mm-hmm. And by the amount of power output is how far it could jump. So one with a bigger power output could jump way farther, and one with a smaller output, which we were on a freighter, could jump and then would have to wait and jump again. Do you get what I mean? That's how it was. And I guess the battleships, the warships could jump 3 or 4 times before it had to wait. They had several generators or whatever power plants on it that could make it jump quickly, and that was part of its weaponry, was the ability to move that fast.
And we saw disclosure of that in the Rise of Skywalker. Honestly, they do the light speed skipping, and then somebody's like, you're not supposed to, you shouldn't be able to do that. Like, how do you do that? And he's like, well, I did it,
Wow.
But it's like the first time they had ever heard of it, even in the movie,
It was a big deal. So the officers on my ship really wanted to be, I guess, even more so because there was pay. So a lot of people say that these colonies don't have money. So the one that I was on had money. There was a money system there. So there was pay. And a part of being paid more to be on a warship, there was this prestige, kind of like they had bragging rights, in the officers' lounge. The guys that worked on a warship were way more respected than everybody else. So everybody wanted to be transferred to a warship, and they would always just kind of look at all. There were a few times when we were alongside them and doing support missions, and the officers really kind of, I don't have the word for it, but they really kind of sucked up to that. You know what I mean? Like they were really envious of that duty.
So I have so many questions, but I want to get through some of this testimony also. So you're outside of Mars. It's very apparent that the airspace is controlled by somebody else. You guys aren't welcome there. You're probably in danger. You're waiting. Is this Ares Prime that we hear about on Mars? Is that where you were going, or?
I don't believe so. Well, so what happened was when we did land, they immediately took us out of the ship. There were people there that were going, but all the kids that were in my unit of, my program, they put bags over our heads, just like they see when they do prisoner, like the Israelis do prisoners.
Yeah.
They put bags over our heads and put us on a smaller ship. They walked us right over. I don't know if it was a hangar or whatever, because they got us right when I set foot off the ship. There were guys there, and they put bags over our head and they grabbed us. They walked us over to a smaller ship, and we rode the entire time to another base, and then they let us out. And it was a smaller craft. I didn't see it, but when we got into another base, it was a forward base. It was an underground base, and it was meant for more people, like 200 or 300 people it would accommodate, but there were only about 50 people there. I guess it had been overran prior to that, and now was kind of like a combat test facility where it had offices. It looked like a school. It had the construction of a modern, like an elementary school, or a mall or something, but it looked more like an elementary school than anything. It had color-coded lines on the walls. That the elevator system was in the center, and it had spokes that would go out on each level, and each spoke had a color so that you could follow it and go to where you were going, like that. You know what I mean? Like everywhere.
Like a parking garage.
Yes, and it was laid out like that. And so the top level had, I think the second level had the hangar, and the top level had the hospital and an armory. And then the second level was the hangar area. And then there were more, and it was the bottom level, the fifth level down at the bottom was where we slept, and that had a cafeteria. One of the wings was an entire cafeteria, and there were administrative facilities like cubicles, and they put cots inside of. They took one room that had a bunch of cubicles, like an office building. It was a big room full of cubicles, and they took out the desks and put cots in there, and that's where we slept. And right across the hall was a bathroom, and Mars had pretty advanced bathrooms compared to everywhere else I went.
That was my next question. Does this stuff look like it was built by humans or ET construction?
By human. It looked like a human.
Like something we would recognize.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
And like I said, I mean, just like a school, like a newer school, sure. Not an old school, but like one of the newer ones that was built in the 2000s. I don't know, if you have kids or whatever, but if you took your kid to a newer elementary school, they're pretty fancy, some of them. And so it was that level of construction.
So nothing in space is old school, is what you're saying.
Ceres Colony was. No, Ceres Colony was. It looked like old Europe. There was marble steps, really? And there were columns. I believe they started building it as early as the 40s.
No, hang on a sec. So Ceres is between Mars and Jupiter, in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Is it in the asteroid belt or near it?
It's just before the asteroid belt from Mars. So it's in between Mars and the asteroid belt.
And they built it, or is it a planetary body?
It's a dwarf planet.
Okay, it's a dwarf planet. Okay.
So a couple things. Okay, I want to pause where we're at in the story, but a couple things. So I want to say that I do have a website out, and I want to give myself a shameless plug. It's Tony Rodrigues with an S on the end, TonyRodrigues.com.
Wait, Rodrigues. So I said that wrong. It's not Rodrigues.
It's not Rodrigues.
It's Rodrigues.
I've been called much worse. So that's fine with me. It's Rodrigues with an S, coming back, whatever. It's not that big. I don't get offended over it at all, but so it's Rodrigues. But
did you have the same name in the secret space program?
No, definitely not. I had a number, and my name changed many times.
Okay.
Every time I went to a different stop, they would nickname you different. I had a number for years.
That's interesting. Go ahead. Continue with your website. So
my website is there, and it has links to some old interviews. I've been doing a lot of interviews. I'm way over 100 interviews. It's got links to a Patreon channel. I started getting. It's important to note that since I've been public, I've had thousands of people reach out to me and say that they have similar memories. So if it's a phenomenon or whatever, but I got to the point where I couldn't keep up with everybody, and I kind of had the same recommendations of things to go through. So there's a course on there. There's a memory recall course. There's a few resources, but also the CIA documents that I found earlier pertaining to Grill Flame. There are a few documents, and then there's a PDF of Stalking the Wild Pendulum. Isaac, I say his name wrong, Bentov. That book is basically the basis of psychic research for the CIA that explains this physics. That free downloads on my website as well. So there's a lot of info there for people to go. Like I said, be skeptical. That's fine, but research. Go ahead and research. Please prove me wrong. it would be great if it was all not true. But unfortunately, every time I dig into it, it pans out.
Well, I do know that you do have evidence for some of this stuff. I know it's probably not safe to share some of it. I don't know.
So I keep the Seattle things kind of, there are, for a few reasons, like I said earlier, like could be innocent people that could get harassed, and there could be bad people that could harass me. So I kind of don't. I have shared it with. I've worked with some government people that I've sworn secrecy in the past. I've shared the information with government agencies and with researchers in the past. So people think that I'm kind of enabling this behavior by not talking about it, but I have shared it with proper authorities when I first came out.
The thing is that you can tell your story every day, all day, and nobody cares because you're not given any sauce, right? Because there's nothing there. There is, you have the stuff, but there's nothing there that somebody can go validate and verify. As soon as you start doing that, that's whenever you put a target on your back, and that's whenever there's people out there to silence you.
There have been a few things. Most recently, so in 2015, I had documented, and with the very first two researchers that I worked with, that I recalled that we flew over the planetoid Ceres, and there was a geyser. So in the Okator crater, that they call them white spots of Okator crater, and NASA did. And everybody said, it's a city. When the Dawn probe was flying up, they said it's a city. I said, no, that was a geyser, and that's salt left over. I remember I flew over it in like 98. And what they told us over the intercom while we were flying over it, looking out the window at it at a geyser going off, is that it happens randomly between 9 years. Every 6 or 9 years, somewhere in there, it randomly just the geyser goes off. And what happens is the water, it's like ocean water, and the water goes up and evaporates, and salt and a little bit of magnesium floats back down, and that leaves the white deposits there. So I said that in 2016 when the Dawn probe was on the way. I said, no, I remember that when the Dawn probe first gave pictures, but NASA back then said those deposits were probably several different chemicals, not salt. But so they said because of the reflectivity of it, it's probably some other chemical. So the researchers said, we'll just have to wait and see. So just last year, I believe in July or August, NASA came back and concluded their study and said that it was salt. And so I had a few vindicating emails that said, Tony, you were right all along. And that's the real public concrete thing that, I said that in 2016, and NASA said it in 2020. And so I called that out, well ahead of time.
How could you have possibly known that?
Right. Exactly. Right. Exactly. And not only that it's a geyser. NASA still thinks that it's like a bubbly, like a little bit of water. They don't know. They haven't really stated that it's a geyser, but we saw the geyser. I saw it with my own eyes. It was beautiful. And what happens is it goes up, and as it evaporates, it's kind of explosive. And the cone that it makes, the salt, the snow, it looks like snow, comes in different speeds back down. So you know what I mean? Like, and it's beautiful because it's all different speeds that it doesn't snow at the same rate. It snows at different speeds. So it's just gorgeous but it's like 10 kilometers tall when it goes up there, and
that's insane.
Wow.
Not something you forget. And,
I mean, it would have to be if you can see it from space. I mean, yeah. And for anybody who's curious, the thumbnail for this video, it's going to be the thumbnail for this entire month, has artist depiction of the planet Ceres, and the white spot on there is the geyser that he's talking about.
I think I have a background here. Let me try if I can.
Yeah, it's whatever you're going to pull up is the same image, I'm pretty sure. But that map is
not working, is it? Okay,
no.
Never mind. Next time.
But anyway, that picture, they can see it on the thumbnail if they're looking at it. But yeah,
I have an artist, like an artist rendition. I had an artist draw what it looked like, but it was much more impressive in real life when I was there. And the Okator crater is like 50 miles wide, so it was a big thing, and we flew through it. So the other thing that is circumstantial is that back in 2016 when I actually took one of the pictures from the Dawn probe from the NASA website, and I drew a line of where we were, left to right, and I remembered the sizes of the salt deposits. Later on, when they came out with a full map of Ceres, the direction we were flying was also pointing right towards the hangar entrance that I remember as well, where we would have entered. So the flight home, it was like it wasn't like I remembered flying it in a different direction. The way that I drew it originally, and then later on I found out that where I identified the entrance. So the hangar entrance is inside what they call a cold trap. It's a place that's dark, 28 days a month. There's dark, so that's where they have the doors to the hangar, so you can't see them. And there's actually a hologram that hides it as well. But there are big doors that the ships fly in, and they're in perpetual darkness inside one of the craters. The one that I identified is actually lined up with the same flight path that I originally drew in 2016. So
yeah,
nice.
Yeah. And for the people who have a hard time believing this or calling you a fraud or anything, I've listened to you enough now. There's just no way. It's clearly, I pay attention to your mannerisms and your body language. There's clearly memory recall happening there.
And you have so much detail that, you're just talking like stream of consciousness. You're not sitting here like trying to remember, okay, what's this part of the story? It's like, I'm like, for somebody to be able to do that, I mean, you either have to have a really, really, a really creative mind to create that story, to a very impressive memory to memorize all that, or you're spending all of your free time just going over your story constantly to memorize
Zero. I do these interviews with zero rehearsal. I was sleeping before I got, I'm not trying to brag or something, but it's better that way. In the beginning, when I started doing interviews, somebody said, we'll send you the questions we're going to ask and you can go over them. And I did. And we got into the interview and I said, I can't even do this. Just ask me because if I can't really plan, it doesn't work that way. It's much better because at the end, when they put you back, they put you through a final bout of mind control programming, and they call these parting gifts. So another whistleblower that came forward called them parting gifts. And what they do is people that go through, and people that I've worked with, it's pretty much across the board. When they start writing it down or they start talking about certain subjects, they'll get sleepy. They'll get, they give you parting gifts to where, like, I can't remember people's faces. I can't remember a lot of names or streets.
Sure.
They put you through individual forms of industrial hypnosis, and you'll forget all the faces that you saw during that time, or all the names.
Sure.
Names are very challenging. People ask me, what was the name of it? Where was that? I don't remember a lot of names. I need somebody else that was at the birthday party.
Yeah.
To remind me of the broken table. But that's how I get the names. The names that I do remember are from meeting other people, and I have met other people. I have found other people that were there as well. So, and it's up to them to come forward. It's not up to me to name them.
What's interesting to me is that I've listened to your story. Every time there's something new, every time. But you skim through stuff sometimes where another interview you go into more detail. So even some of the stuff you told here, there's a lot more details that just didn't come through in this interview that are there. And that's why it's so important to listen to all these interviews to really paint a full picture.
Really in 2 or 3 hours. And what I found is I'm working on a book as well. And what I found is that I guess maybe it's the hosts, you know what I mean? Like maybe you feel comfortable. You know what I mean? Like there are aspects of what I went through that I feel more comfortable speaking with a woman.
Sure.
Do you get what I mean? Like, like an older woman, like a mom figure would bring out different things that I felt versus talking with guys like, hey bro, this is what I went through, you blew that thing up,
Yeah.
So maybe there's a component of that, but there's just so much that we could spend hours and hours just talking about the first 30 minutes of the abduction.
Yeah.
And everybody, for the first year, everybody just wanted to hear about Mars because there's actually quite a big, like a disclosure group. There's clearly quite a big community centered around the Mars Colony Corp or, activity on Mars, because the early whistleblowers in the early 90s and mid 90s were all Mars guys.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So that's kind of a developed part of the community. So some interviews, that's all we ever talk about is Mars, and it doesn't get to Ceres Colony.
Well, Mars and the moon are going to be, it's going to be a while still, but they're going to be among the first to be disclosed. So that's why. That's like in the collective. That's what people want to know about, Same with like Area 51 and stuff like that. I
hear SpaceX is planning on being on Mars within the next 2 years.
Yeah, well,
or heading towards Mars in the next 2 years.
Yeah, exactly.
So, sure. and I think that there's when you look at our history, so the Germans, the story is that the Germans in the late 30s went to the moon, and when they got there, that qualified them to be in the club up there.
Claim their
territory.
You get what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, now that they were in an interstellar society, that they could join and in a way do business with interstellar society. So then we had the United States in the late 60s do this, stop everything and go to the moon. And then they went to the moon a few missions, and then it all just dropped. So they were in the club as well.
We're done going to the moon now publicly,
So right. So maybe it's the same thing.
All the money that gets funded, all the money that gets fueled or that NASA is funded, or whatever I'm trying to say, that money is actually funding the black budget programs and the secret space programs. NASA is just a big cover. And then the people at NASA have to be under that mind control, and they have to believe they're actually trying to get to the moon when we're already up there. It's just part of their show.
There is a vast infrastructure of human networks throughout the solar system. There are many, and the average school kid thinks there's, we used to have 9 planets, and now there are 8 and a dwarf. And then there are moons, 20 or 30 moons on Jupiter, but the reality is that there are hundreds and hundreds of bodies in our solar system that you can set up a base on. The other missing component of this is the artificial gravity. The same technology that gives anti-gravity for the ships to get up there grants artificial gravity. So Ceres was only 540 miles in diameter. It has microgravity. In the mines, I did work one day. They screwed up my assignment my first day, and I went to the mines, and I worked a day there. And what they do is they mine in microgravity, and then they vacuum out the dust, and then they install gravity plating. It's a flooring. It's the floor that is gravity plating that creates artificial gravity, and it goes up to like 10 meters of gravity that it can create before you get back to the microgravity. And they can change it. They can focus it so that they can create gravity only 6 feet, and you know what I mean? And you get into the microgravity. So, but they would install that in and then continue to mine out the debris and then continue mining. They were looking for water. But the ships have it as well. And when you think about that technology, you think about free power and then artificial gravity. They can install a base pretty much anywhere on any kind of rock. And so they are everywhere throughout our solar system by now. And they're not all by the same. So I understand that there's something like 5 different fleets that are operating, that are human, that are operating in our solar system and in nearby stars.
Help me understand something. So is this like we see in Star Wars? Are you just like walking around in these ships? Are you strapped in like the astronauts are in the rocket? And
great question, though. It's the first time I heard that question, but that's a good question. Like a lot of people don't. I've had a few artists work on the ship. I need to do more. I need to really go and. Artists have always asked me if they wanted some help, and then that's how the pictures came. They would approach me and I would work with them. But I need to go and seek out some art working. But the ships are more like an airplane. As far, and then the big ones that I was on was more like a naval ship, more like a cruise ship. And in the front of it, it was plush. So like the Max von Laue, the final ship that I was on was a freighter. It was a cargo ship. The front half of it had an elevator, and it had carpet, and it was the wider hallways, and the main sea deck. So it had 5 main decks and then 2 half decks, or 2.5 half decks. But the main deck in the center of it was where everybody went to. There were food and the bathroom, and it was and the observation deck. That's where you went to look out the window. When we were passing something, they would announce it. They'd give you 10 minutes off from your post, and you could go up there and wits like the geyser. And that was on the sea deck. The rear of the ship was like metal. Like there were ladders, not an elevator. We had ladders and staircases that were industrial. It looked like everything was covered in like a white epoxy. It looked more like a factory, with a cargo base than the front of the ship. The front of the ship was more plush.
So you could move about freely on these ships, though. There was never
just
a
like
point.
You were on a cruise
there was never
ship,
a point where you had to like strap in and buckle down.
No.
Okay.
You could not tell that you were moving. There was no sense of motion whatsoever. When we did go underwater, we did go to Antarctica sometimes, and we would have to go underwater. And when that happened, you could hear the ship, the hull would pop, but every now it would flex, and you could hear echoes like "pow," and it would echo through the ship. But that was about it. That was the only. It was kind of scary, to be honest, but I was afraid of it when that happened. But we were totally safe. I guess the way that it does is it turns the water around the ship weightless, and because water doesn't flex, you know what I mean? Water is, I forget the term, hydrostatically. Water doesn't compress.
Yeah.
Because the weightless water doesn't compress, it pushes the other water easily out of the way. So the ship just can go at very high speeds underwater. It was something like that.
Yeah, it's like creates its own atmosphere, basically.
Well, for a distance around the ship, all the water is weightless.
Yeah.
And so as the ship pushes it, it's weightless as well.
Okay. So yeah, I understand that in your time in the programs, you actually did visit Earth quite a bit, which is
we did, and it was a secret to some of the public on Ceres, as I was just reminded by talking to another whistleblower recently, which is something that I kind of was vaguely remember, but didn't. And we were careful about who we talked about. Even though I was basically a slave, I wasn't even really an officer commissioned. I didn't really have a rank, but we were still expected to be quiet about going to Earth, about missions to Earth, because the majority of the public on Ceres was told that Earth was destroyed, was uninhabited.
1949, a cobalt bomb,
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd forgotten that, so I'd been reminded. That's something that I was reminded of. But I remember that there were people, and the reason that I confirmed this, so the memory that I have of that I confirmed that, is I remember telling people about it, and them always saying, "Well, at least thank you, because that gives." Other people that were in my boat that were slaves like me, that I told them that I went to Earth, it's fine, there's nothing wrong with it. We were just there last night, and there are people there, and I lived on Earth. Like, it was classified. And I remember people that I told that to were so relieved by it, that they were, oh, thank God, thank you for telling me that, even though I don't believe you. That was really what it was. I don't believe you, but thanks for telling me that.
It's still there, but it's owned by demons.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Diego Garcia, the island in the Indian Ocean, is that place you visited?
Right in there somewhere. We did. Yeah. So this would have been in the late 90s, 97, 98, 99, right in those years. That whenever we needed equipment, military equipment or cargo, for when they would arrange a trade with some other species that needed just goods, like raw goods, that was produced by the Earth, we would go to Diego Garcia and pick it up. That's where we picked up most of human-made cargo, Earth-made cargo. We would pick it up there. We'd always go in the middle of the night. There's a big, like a parking lot size piece of asphalt, like a big square where the planes are. We would land there, and they would truck it out to us, and there was always 2 American officers. There'd be one that would coordinate the offload or loading it, and there was another one that had a clipboard that we would have to sign off. He was he gave us like a receipt for it. And we would go there and pick up cargo quite often.
Primarily, I mean, there's an underground base. It's not just the island, obviously. That goes underground there too, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm not aware. There was a lot that went on there. I'm not aware of that. We went there. There was one occasion where we were waiting on a boat to arrive, and so we had a few hours layover. We went to the place. It's called Turtle Cove or Turtle Bay at the bottom of the island, and they said that there are certain times. When I first spoke about Diego Garcia in 2016, somebody commented on one of the YouTube. There was a guy that commented, and he said, BS, Tony. They never gave us a curfew at Diego. I was there for 5 years, and we never had a curfew. We could always go where we are. And then a couple years later, I found an article from somebody else that Diego Garcia frequently locks down the base in the middle of the night, and you're not allowed to go anywhere. Yeah. And that's what I remember is when we were there, that there were only a handful of people that knew we existed. that we were there at all, and that they locked down the entire base, the entire island, that it was in the middle of the night, 3 a.m., that nobody was allowed to leave their wherever their room for a couple hours. And that was when we were there. So when we were waiting on that boat, they extended the lockdown, and we hovered over Turtle Cove, and they let us, we had a cargo net out of the rear cargo bay that we'd let down, and we'd go swimming. They let people go swimming in the water, because we had time to kill. It was like a recreational thing that they would let us do.
So you could have essentially visited Earth and ran into yourself because of how the 20 and back works. Right?
Yes, absolutely. And that's what, so like you said, Tompkins said there's a pill or a procedure for age regression. And I think that that's true. And I think that that's one of the things that may have happened. But I think that during that time, because events in my own life would kind of support this, you know what I mean? The life I lived would also support it. I think that there's a cloning aspect. I think that I was cloned in 82. And I think that when they clone you, it's a vegetable, it's a brain dead thing. And they have to use some of spark of life, quantum superfluid consciousness, your consciousness. And I think that they took it from me. And that's why they take only a certain pie slice of the population that gets this procedure, because you have to have a certain amount of awareness for them to do it. And I think they took some of my consciousness and put it in the clone, and the clone went and did that. And then at the end of 20 years, they put the clone back in time, which time travel,
time and space is time.
Time travel is hard to talk to people about, and also hard to prove, right? Because there's so many, it's so complex to think about this.
Not so much anymore, though. So many articles are coming out now about the possibility of time travel, and they're seeding the consciousness. They're getting their ducks in a row for some type of disclosure. So
time travel was a linchpin of the technology of the Ceres colony. They were using time travel on the missions quite a bit. Mm-hmm. But anyhow, so the clone goes back in time, and then all they have to do is kill it, and my consciousness would find its way back to myself.
Interesting.
Or however they did it. I don't, like I said, it was like having surgery. I don't know what they did.
Yeah, well, I've heard it described. There's like a bed you actually lay in, and I've heard different whistleblowers describe the procedure. I don't think they used a pill, but I think the pill is something that is.
It was injections. I was getting injected every day. There were, and it was very uncomfortable that they I was held still. It was exactly like other people. I remember foam like a barrier around me to keep me from moving. And then every day they would come in and give me, I got injections in my legs and in my arms. Like they gave you a bunch of shots. And then that went on felt like a couple weeks.
Yeah.
But there was a time in my life. So at that time, after the abduction, I went from being in the top 5% of the school, one of the highest SAT scores in the school, basically a straight A's and B's student, to a D and E student ever after. And then later on in life, and I never really had I had breathtaking emotional problems. I had relationship problems. I couldn't buy a girlfriend with $1 million because I was kind of a basket case my whole life that I grew up after that point, after 10 years old. Later on in the year 2000, which is 18 years later, but because the ship did temporal flights, it would go out for a day and come back just a minute later before it left. So that time added up to 20 years. I did the math later. It checks out.
Yeah.
The year 2000, one day I woke up and I kept saying to myself, I just woke up out of bed and I said, it's over. It's over. I went, oh my God, it's over. And I didn't know what I was talking about. I did not have my memories back, but I instantly got it together, cleaned up my room. I was emotionally stable. I started having healthy relationships. I started making more money. I got back together after it was over. Like that period of time, it was as if my consciousness was watered down. Do you get what I mean? Like I was like a lesser person mentally. And you know what I mean? Like I'm playing catch up in life because of it.
That makes
man. It's
that makes so much sense, actually.
It does make a lot of sense.
That was exactly the experience. That was what I experienced. So
that makes a lot of sense. And one more thing, and then we'll wrap this first part up and give people a chance to digest all this stuff, and then we'll come back with the second part. But the one thing I love, I've heard you say before, is that when you would visit or you would hear a song be re-released, because in the programs you would a song would be released on Earth and you would get a hold of it and listen to it. But then in your life now, when that song came out, it's like you've already heard it be released.
It was super old. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So in Seattle during the parties, they would play their music all night long. We were parties. We were a booth. You know, to revisit that was an ugly thing to talk about, but those parties would go all night long right till dawn. It started at like 10 or 11 p.m. and it would go right till the sun came up, and they would play music over and over. Like they had a DJ, and I remember those songs. And so later on in life, in the 80s, like I lived the 80s twice.
So you heard Nirvana before?
Well, it wasn't Nirvana. It was like Led Zeppelin. And,
okay.
Remember the song "Take on Me" by Aha?
Yeah.
That came out that summer that my first party in Seattle that I went out and came out. I think it was 86. I'd have to look. Okay. But that song had just came out at one of those during the month of those parties was when it was released. So they played it over and over again. Everybody ran to the dance floor when they played it. And that was then. And so when it came out again later in the 80s, when I came in my organic life, I went, whoa, this is an old song. And I literally was watching MTV when it was released, when it was new. You know what I mean? Like as a kid, and I was watching MTV and I went, what is this? What? And there were Aerosmith songs that were released in the 80s that I had heard that I'd already known. I was like, this is old. This thing's like 20 years old.
Because you've heard them in the programs already.
Yeah, I had already heard them, right.
And then later on, and relived your life, you heard them released again. And
then later on the MVL, so what happened was on the Max von Laue, our media officer was a girl, very pretty girl, and she was the media officer. So she was the one that talked on the intercom, or she did media apparently when they interact with other civilizations, there's immediate need for a media officer, you know, for who knows what they were doing. But one of the American guys at Diego Garcia gave her an iPod or a music player, an MP3 player. This is the late 90s, so whatever player, and it had songs on it, hundreds of songs, and those are banned. And the media from Earth is banned up there. You're not supposed to listen to it, but it was bootleg. There was a bootleg industry on the Ceres Colony where they were taking books and VHS movies and things from Earth and bootlegging them up there.
That's amazing.
But he gave her this, and the captain agreed. She figured out a way to get it to play over the intercom. Like it took her a few tries. She tried to do it and it didn't work. And then a few days later they came in, and the captain said because there was a signal on all of our media has a signal on it that's bad for you, basically, like a mind, like a subliminal thing going on. I don't know exactly. And they would play one song a day. That he gave one song a day. And we listened to music for about a month. We would be flying through space, and I'm not lying, listening to Led Zeppelin, like flying through the solar system. And it was cool. We looked forward to it. It was very cool because we didn't get the guys that were slave labor, we didn't have access to media at all. So that was like a big deal to us. But what happened was the crew, the kids and they were young. They were all young kids. The crew in the bridge fought over it, what song to play next. That some of them wanted to hear the same song we heard last week. I want to play that one again. And some of them wanted to hear another one. And they got into heated arguments about it. And the captain made them play it. He's like, well, now you guys, since they want to fight about it, we're going to learn my music. And he played polka. It was disgusting. It was terrible. It was horrible. We were like, I'd rather not even hear it, and then they quit altogether. He got rid of it altogether. It was more trouble than it was worth.
Well, Tony, this has been awesome. We're gonna take a quick break, and we'll come back and get back into your testimony, leave off where we left off on Mars, and get into the rest of it because it's absolutely fascinating. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Don't forget, we have our Hopewell Farm CBD available. The link is below. That promo code is over, but this stuff is really fantastic. It helps me sleep. Different
best CBD.
It's potent. The THC is very high in it. It can't be shipped overseas because of it, but if you're in the United States, I highly recommend it. And then don't forget, we still have our 20% off on our t-shirts on Teespring with promo code Sleepy Joe. And we're going to let that run indefinitely until he's out of the picture. So
a couple weeks from now.
Yeah. Well, who knows what'll happen?
Maybe.
Honestly,
We'll see.
Who knows what's going to happen? So guys, thank you so much. And stay tuned for part 2 in a couple days. See you next time.
People ask me about my tribe. The truth is, my tribe is relatively unknown, for we are but a few. We have walked many planes and graced infinite timelines. Our calling is eternal. Our homecoming, imminent. We, the paradigm shifters. The tireless truth seekers. The mighty light warriors. Earth's grid explorers. The curious crop circlers. Mystical stargazers. The great one-liners. The astral travelers. Welcome home, starseeds.